WHCI TV. We are also on Connecticut News Junkie. We are also on a whole bunch of other channels, and Ronnie's in the middle of putting that up. So in about a minute, we will get rolling. We've got our guests, and we are ready to go.
All right. Even though I restarted my computer, it's still in a bit of slow motion. So bear with me for just a second.
All right. Looks like, whoops. And I'm going to put it over on the Dems page because they asked me to do it.
Great.
If I can figure out how to share it. There we go. And then just to go through the checklist, Ronnie, you'll do neighbors and friends, chat. And do you want a political forum or you want me to do that?
And the political page.
Yeah. Do you want me to do it or do you got
and
it done?
I got it.
Okay. And then News Junkie, do they grab it themselves or do you do that?
They should do it.
Okay.
I don't have access.
Otherwise, they can share it after the fact. So no worries either way. So, okay, let me get rid of that. So we're on the right page. Okay. So you think we're ready?
I hate when my computer doesn't save what I'm posting to Facebook.
I know. Yeah, I always cut and paste. I always try to cut and paste it.
And it takes me a while. I have to retype it. Now I spelled Jillian wrong.
Just don't use a G. You'll be safe.
All right, one more, and I will be there.
And we have our first question tonight. Jason, we would love to, but the way the broadcast app works is we can't. So, and the question is, can't we do this before we start? So at least we have a viewer.
Yeah,
so.
no, we can't.
Yeah, it's just the way the app is designed and the way we integrate it.
Yeah,
so.
We're good to go.
All right, Ronnie, thank you very much. Welcome to this week's special Tuesday night edition of the WeHa.com Roundtable. I'm John Lyons, joined as always by Ronnie Newton, the managing editor of WeHa.com. We welcome our viewing audience watching online, locally, on TV, and around the state on Connecticut News Junkie. And thank you all for taking time from your dinner hour to join us tonight. Today, we welcome West Hartford residents and state representatives, Jillian Gilchrist from the 18th District and Tammy Exum from the 19th District. We're going to be talking about a variety of issues, including the marathon special session that happened last week, the Senate session, which is happening right now, what's going on with schools, COVID, and a whole lot more. As usual, let's kick this off, Ronnie, and I'm going to ask you to just keep it short in the interest of time because we're 10 minutes behind schedule. Ronnie, what's on your mind? What's in your notebook?
So my notebook is actually full of a couple of really fun things. And one is Mecca Noodle Bar, which is a fun business piece that I'm in the middle of writing about. I actually went today. They had a media event and I got to sample a lot of different food items. And it's called Southeast Asian Comfort Food is what they're calling it. But it's really, it's not quite fusion because each dish kind of stands on its own. And it's not a fusion of cultures in each dish, but more a lot of different types of really kind of fun foods on the menu. Great price point, just a fun place, and it's opening on Wednesday, tomorrow. So look for that story on weha.com later. And I think schools are really the other big issue that, other than the other things that are going on in the legislature, it's really what people are talking about. Yesterday in his press conference, Governor Lamont indicated that it is now going to be up to the districts and the superintendents to decide what plan to open under. They have said statewide the goal is to get all the children back in school, but whether that's an all in-person experience or a hybrid experience is now not going to be dictated by the state as people have thought for the past couple of weeks, but that decision will be with the superintendents. So I know there's a lot of discussions going on in West Hartford Public Schools right now. A lot of teachers who are fired up, to say the least, because they feel like they've kind of been left out of surveys. But one thing that people should know is that the survey that the district did was intended for the purpose of determining how many slots there needed to be for in-school education. They're trying to figure out how many kids are planning, or how many parents are planning to send their children back to school in person, so they can assess hiring needs, assess how they're going to set up the classrooms, busing, and things like that. It's not really it's a do you want to go to school in person to the families, but they know there need to be teachers there. So kind of the next step is to deal with, or to figure out who's going to be teaching what, as well as what plan we're going to be under. And, a lot of that's going to need to wait until we see what the numbers are like in a couple of weeks. So back to school is not going to look like back to school has ever looked in this state this year. So that's my main contents of my notebook right now.
Ronnie, thanks. So let me do this. Jillian and Tammy, you guys take it how you want. Oh, I think we just lost Tammy, but we'll get her back up in a minute. So Jillian, I'll ask you. You used to be on the Board of Ed here in West Hartford. What would you do? What are your thoughts on this? I think you've got a unique perspective, having served on the board.
Sure. And thank you, and thank you both for having me tonight. Not only is my perspective having served on the board, but it's also as a parent. So I have a daughter who's about to go into 3rd grade and a son who's about to go into 6th. And it's also the perspective of, I'm the daughter of 2 public school teachers, and my sister is a public school teacher. So as a parent, I want my kids back in school. I'm a working mom, and this spring was really challenging. It taught me that I'm not a teacher for a reason. I really respect what the teachers do. But as the daughter of teachers, and as someone who's been listening to the teachers, I'm concerned. We're doing this virtually. I hold all my meetings virtually. Connecticut's still in phase 2. I think that the plans are really amazing, and I applaud everyone for the work that has gone into the plans. But I actually had a call today with some teachers from West Hartford, and when you look at the operational level and the tactical level, it just, I don't know. I don't know if it can play out, and I'm just concerned. And so that's where I'm at. And I, as a parent, again, want to say, like, let's do it. Let's go back. But I have a lot of apprehension and concerns.
What about sending? I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
You go ahead, Ronnie.
I was going to say, what about, people have talked about maybe the lower level, the elementary school children should be able to go back, but maybe a hybrid at the middle and high school level, or at the high school level, because they could handle that a little more easily. What do you think about that as an option?
I still think, in having this conversation today, what was so interesting, like, let's really dive into the elementary. Then you'd have to think, okay, like, if the elementary went back, well, you still have 23 students in a classroom. What's going to happen at lunchtime? There's a lot of talk of, they can go outside to eat lunch, but we're also talking about PE might be outside. Some other classes might be outside. School starts, it's very hot. Are there tents? Will there be bathrooms outside? If there's no bathrooms outside, will a student have to go inside to go to the bathroom? Who will watch them to make sure they have their mask on? Where will the water be? It was all these conversations of, like, yes, the plan on a whole, like at a top level, like, looks good, but when you start to play it out, how is it going to actually work? And then for those teachers, so in the elementary level, if the specialists are going to be going from classroom to classroom, like, we keep talking about cohorting, and in the elementary, it seems most likely that you'd be able to do that. But then when you dive deeper, if those specialist teachers are going from classroom to classroom, they're being exposed to various cohorts and bringing that into other rooms. So I just do have a lot of concerns.
Tammy, I don't know how much of that you picked up. We had a technical issue and lost Tammy there. She had to rejoin. But Tammy, the question Ronnie and I posed to Jillian and posed to you is, we think you two have a unique perspective, having served on the West Hartford Board of Ed. You heard from Ronnie's notebook talking about what's going on with schools and how Ned Lamont has made the decision to let the school districts and the municipalities decide what to do. What are your thoughts on that process, and what are your thoughts if you've got older kids like me, but if you had kids going back into the school system, where's your head at?
You know, I think that we've all been waiting for guidelines and guidance. And so it was a little bit of a departure to hear that it would be really locally determined. I think that it's really kind of complicated, particularly at the high school level. I think middle and high school level will get a little trickier as you have so many more kids. They're bigger. They're in a space that I think it's really difficult to imagine accommodating a full return. One of the things I heard yesterday was what the logic is when we do the survey, as was done, and you find out a particular percentage of the population may be returning, but the other ones who aren't returning, that's a really valuable part of that equation as well, because that helps us to really think about how much you can spread out in a space, what other spaces you can utilize within a building. But we also need metrics. We also need guidance to understand when will we know, say we go back as what full looks like, which is parents making that choice, families making those choices come this fall. But when will we know when we're supposed to go full into school? When will we know, hey, this number, these metrics are changing. We might need to go back to hybrid, or we might have to go completely back to remote learning altogether. And that is something that we do need state support around. That's something that the local districts can't really determine on their own. So I think certain things would need to be standardized, and other things will be, it is good to have local control. So it's that balance. This is complicated.
Yeah.
Because we do want our kids to go back to school, because we need our economy to jumpstart, and we need children to learn. We know younger children, they need that in-person, usually that in-person type of instruction, and those that they're doing so much social emotional development at that younger age. I was a second grade school teacher many years ago, but I remember what they required. And I think though they still need that in middle and high school in different ways. But we still have this pandemic that we're dealing with. We have teachers that we have to consider. So it is a very complicated equation. I'm not giving you any answers. I'm restating all the issues, but I think it's something that we all have to work on very strategically. I heard one superintendent say, well, what we will do perhaps in her district is take a class like music, instead of the whole school rotating through the music, and they would in fact do it in a deep and wide, where the students would have music every day in a particular, their pod or cohort, until they get all of their lessons that they would have in a year. And then that teacher moves to another pod, and that kind of mitigates some of the spread of the, or potential spread of anything. So I think we're going to be creative. I think we're going to take ideas from our neighbors. I think there may be people, really working more closely together, but no easy solutions here.
Ronni, any questions before I go to the next topic here? Or?
No, not really. I mean, I have so many comments and so many questions, but I don't think there are any answers. It's not it's not even that people don't want to give answers. It's just they don't even exist. And you feel like you're throwing darts up against the wall, really, and no one knows the right answer now. I don't know if and when we will know the right answer, but there's no good solution other than this virus going away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to imagine right now.
Yeah.
And I did hear today there was an announcement about the Everybody Learns. I don't know, Ronni, if you picked that up.
I did see that, and I already reached out to Tom Moore to find out if West Hartford's impacted in any way by that, and he didn't know yet. He had not been notified about that, so I'm not sure what that's going to mean, what that is. I think it's like a $43.5 million infusion of money into the educational system. It'll pay for another 50,000 laptops and or pieces of technology, as well as vouchers for internet access and or a hotspot for communities that have trouble with connections. So we've lost Tammy again on the video. But
having trouble with connections. I'm not
but
sure
in
why.
any case, I'm not sure West Hartford is going to be part of that, or if we are, in what way. So that's to come. So
Jillian, I'll pivot to you. I've got questions for both of you on this topic. So it's if there's ever good timing for losing somebody, but so both you
coffee.
and
Still drinking
Tammy,
coffee.
have had kind of unusual paths. You not so much, but you are in your first and closing in on the end of your first term. Talk to us just experientially. What have you learned? What are some of the things that surprised you? What are the things you've really enjoyed? Talk to us a little bit about your experience as a state rep.
Sure. First and foremost, I love it. I'm really happy I ran, and really happy I get to serve, and just so grateful for the opportunity. What I've learned is that there are power structures even once you get elected. And so being in the state legislature, there are folks who've been around a lot longer. The chairs of committees have more power than those of us who are not a chair of a committee. And so there's folks you need to meet with and go through in order to get your policies elevated to the level of priority. But that said, I pushed for a bill, the licensing of nail technicians, eyelash technicians, and estheticians, and the chair of the Public Health Committee, they did not raise it, and I still was able to, move it through certain channels and get it through. So I think there are ways you can get things done. So I guess I've learned that I need still my advocacy skills that I had on the outside when I was an activist and an advocate in the inside. And the biggest takeaway is that partnering is key. And so working with colleagues is how you get things done. Certainly could never have predicted that my second year would result in a worldwide pandemic and having to leave the legislature in March. And what it immediately turned into was constituent services. I mean, constituent services is always part of the role. But once the pandemic hit, it really flipped to, I'd say before the pandemic, it was 80% policy, 20% constituent services. And once the pandemic hit, it went about 70% constituent services, 30% policy. So my degree is in social work. I really utilized that degree, and it's been eye-opening and rewarding, which is a weird word, but to see, not rewarding, it's been impactful to see how the COVID has impacted so many people in so many different ways. And then I guess rewarding in that I'm in a position where I can try and help people to navigate that.
So Tammy, the same question for you, which I don't know how much of it you heard, but you're in a really unique situation. You joined, you were elected the representative in a special election. You had to literally hit the ground running halfway through the session last year. And now this year, you haven't had a regular session other than the special session. So, you haven't even gotten to see a session yet. So a full session. Talk a little bit about your experience and, what's going on.
It is absolutely true. It was, I came in the last week of April of 2019, and I think we had about 6 weeks of session. And within my first hour, I was voting. Within my first hour, I'd had a press conference. I said, what am I talking about? I just got here. And it was really a crazy experience. I think my second week there, we had an all-night debate on the minimum wage. And I was in the chambers so long that people said, do you know you can leave? I said, I do know I can leave, but I haven't seen this process like this before. I was absolutely amazed at having that opportunity. I felt so fortunate to have the support and to be able to be in this position. It's unique for me. I inherited the committees. I was assigned 3 committees that previously were held by Derek Slapp, my predecessor. And so I'm on the Environment Committee, Banking and Government Administration and Elections, which is very interesting to be a part of. But the committee work had wrapped up. The hearing process was done. So I was really looking forward to going back and seeing how this all played out in February. And we got there in February, got a little bit done. I was really excited about a bill that I was helping to introduce around a Living Donor Protection Act, which would help kidney recipients or kidney donors to be able to not be penalized by the insurance industry by being an organ donor. And we had made just a wonderful amount of progress on that. And then everything stopped. And as Jillian says, at that point, we really went and played the role of taking care of our constituents, helping in any way we could, really trying to, we had a lot of briefing sessions with commissioners and with leadership to try to find out how to best help everyone navigate this. It has been something that you just learn as you go. I've jumped into something and I'm learning as I go. I don't pretend to know all the answers, but what I try to do is connect people to the people who will help them the most, and to be a willing ear and recipient of what it is that they're experiencing, and try to help leverage and help in any way that I can. One of the things I was just getting to do was to get to know my communities, because I don't just serve in West Hartford, I also have a part of Avon and Farmington. And that was something I was just getting to be involved in as well. And it all kind of changed, but the constituents are everywhere. But as far as the communities, they are a little bit different. And so I'm just continuing to learn, and we have like 2 all-nighters, and I think we just went through something else that was we're grateful to be, I'm grateful to be a part of, and to have the trust of people to represent them.
So you had an all-nighter last week. Tell us about it. What were some of the issues you discussed, and where are we at on these issues?
Do you want me to start, or do you let Jillian start?
Wherever you like, whichever one.
So we discussed 4 different issues. Telehealth, which means before the pandemic, during the pandemic, a few executive orders were written so that folks could receive healthcare through telehealth. And so we passed a bill that extends that through March, and that providers would be reimbursed at the same rate that they would if they were doing in person. We passed a bill to cap costs on insulin. And then two of the bigger items that I think most people are aware of are absentee ballots. So ensuring that folks in November can access an absentee ballot for fear of COVID. You don't actually have to be sick with COVID. You can use an absentee ballot just because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And then also police accountability. And so interestingly, the absentee ballot ended up not being as as folks would have thought. And so I don't think it was unanimous, but there were barely any votes against it, which was really interesting to me. Police accountability there were more sticking points, and that was a really interesting vote. I'd love to continue the dialogue, but I'll stop and let Tammy jump in, and then, I would love to jump back in.
Sure. I think the absentee ballot voting, I was just looking at that, it was 144-2. So it really did go through. I think you're right. Like, we were expecting it to be a little more controversial than it was. Thankfully, I think everyone realized that none of us wanted to be responsible for people having to choose between their health and their vote. And so that was a really, I felt great about that bill. And we're just trying to get ready for that here locally. And then it was really interesting, the police accountability bill. We started, I think it was introduced around
I think it was about 1:20 a.m.
Yeah, 1:20 or so.
The tweets I saw.
Yes, in the morning. And it was an intense night. I think that the debate went on initially around 3 hours before an amendment came out to remove qualified immunity from the bill. And that was when there was a lot of testimony that took place, really speaking. Most of the testimony was why to keep it in the bill. And there was a willingness for this bill. It was so important that there was a risk taken there that the bill may not go through. It could very easily fail. And it was something that came down to a tie. And that caused the amendment to fail, and for it to remain, qualified immunity to remain as a part of the bill. But I want to point out that is huge, that remaining in the bill. But the bill in and of itself is a very robust bill with so many different pieces to it. And I think it's important not to lose sight of that, and to really try to level set that this is not a punitive measure to create a bill like this. This bill was created in order to allow the good cops to continue, the good police officers to continue to do the job that they do. That is the majority of our police officers. But what this bill does, it makes it more difficult to have for police officers who are not doing what they're supposed to do to continue to serve in the way that they have traditionally. It truly, when you hear the word accountability, that's what this is about. It's about really holding people accountable who have all of this power and who have access to using all different kinds of ways, from de-escalation, but always also to ways that can be very dangerous or deadly. And having the proper training, making sure we have the proper body cameras and different. Getting rid of like the consent searches, which I was so struck by this conversation on the floor that said, we need to educate the drivers so that they know that they don't have to give consent.
Oh boy, that's a shame. I don't
You
know
know
why
what?
that keeps happening. Jill, maybe you want to kind of
I
keep
think
going.
we can still hear her.
Tammy,
Can
you
you
there?
hear me, Tammy?
No.
Nope.
So I'll jump in. I think another piece of the bill that doesn't get enough play but gets some controversy is the mental health piece. So one of the pieces of the bill says that law enforcement has to get these mental health screens. Now, what's so beautiful about our process, about the governmental process, is that there was a public hearing last Friday. Well, now, no, what day am I on? 2 Fridays ago. And at the public hearing, it came out that, okay, you're going to do these mental health screenings with law enforcement. Well, what happens afterward? And interestingly, nothing in the bill. And so there was pushback, as well as there should be, because if we're going to be doing mental health screens, we need to support these officers if it should come back that they need some supports. And so those conversations have now happened. And so in the regulations, we know that they will play out what happens when a police officer does have a mental health screen that comes back that they need support. Tammy, I just jumped in and talked a little bit about the mental health screens and how we recognized that law enforcement would need something if they were to have, but please jump back in with some of the other key points.
Oh, I just wanted to finish what I was saying. I am so sorry. I don't know what's happening here. Every time I start talking, I disappear. But I just wanted to say that one of the arguments was that the people who were being stopped were to be educated around the fact that they could say, no, you can't, I'm not giving you consent to search my car. And I thought it was just such an interesting argument, because when we see police officers as people who are in positions of power and authority, and we were talking, I mean, so much of this, let's be really clear, so much of this legislation came about as a response to the incident regarding the death of George Floyd. And so we understand that when you're Black and brown and you're pulled, I don't think it's logical that people would say, oh, really, you're not going to do this, and think that that would end okay. That may in some cases, but in some cases it doesn't. So I thought, I mean, that was an important part of the bill that we addressed as well, that we don't just have that taking place. And then there's just so many different pieces. The mental health piece was really big too, and making sure that we have regular, I think once every 5 years, within a 5-year period of time, is that right, Jillian, that they,
I believe so.
Yeah, that they need to have those mental health checks. But there are so many sections of this bill that make it a really robust piece of legislation that allows our municipalities to look and say, you know, we want to be very careful and clear about who we hire. And we expect that the people that we're bringing in are going to be people who don't worry about this bill being in the bill that we've introduced. And one of the other things, I think that we had a very unique perspective. We have 2 police officers that serve right now, and one is active, and he is currently a police officer who helped to get the information that is in this legislation. And he said that this doesn't hurt him at all. This is really not the kind of legislation that harms good police officers. So I just wanted to echo that again.
And then I jump in. I think another piece that was so interesting to me, you know, it kind of combines your last question with this question. During my first session, what I learned quickly, once we got to, you know, first you're doing committee work, then you get to the session point where you're in the House chamber. And I quickly learned that the House Democrats do vote counts, which is completely normal. That's what they do. But when you're an advocate on the outside, which I had been for years, I didn't know that all of that was going on. And so when you're an advocate, you're just waiting and thinking, why aren't they calling the bill? Like, what is happening? And if we just advocate, and they've been doing these internal vote counts, and if the vote count isn't going to work, they're not going to call the bill, because they're not going to make their members vote for something if they know it's going to fail. Well, what was so unique the other night is that the advocacy of those on the outside of the building, those fighting for Black lives, and then the advocacy of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, of which Tammy is a very active member, was so strong that they said, no, you call the vote. And so that's why it was a tie. That was the first vote that Matt Ritter, who was our majority leader, said he had no idea what the vote was going to be. And to play this out for folks, so they actually updated our technology. And so we're in our offices with a computer screen that's showing us the board we're usually looking at in the House chamber. And it is now, what time was that? I don't even know, in the morning. I don't know, 5:30, 6.
Yeah, around 5 or 6, yeah.
We've been up since obviously 6 a.m. like the next day. If you're an adult, you wake up early. so I'm sitting there and I'm staring at the screen, trying to count the dots, like trying to what is this? Because there were so many on, and then it comes across tie. I mean, and it was because what was so powerful to me, and I was saying it the whole night, no, you call the vote. People want to know where people stand with this issue. And that was on the amendment. And then with the bill, there was it wasn't a tie. But that was so powerful to me, because that's true democracy to me. It's like, let's not do this behind closed doors. Like, let's make people vote.
Yeah, that was powerful. I get goosebumps, quite frankly, just hearing you retell it, because it was not easy, but it was the thing that, it was a defining piece of legislation that was so important that we were willing to have people come to task on it. And it was a lot of processing. I wasn't in my office, but
yeah, you were. Tammy was working that bill really hard with her colleagues in the Black and Puerto Rican caucus.
Absolutely, we were.
I was there cheering.
Yes, you were. Jillian was in there. I was so impressed.
All of the representatives have to walk into the building by the protesters, by these people advocating for this. You're listening to people's speeches. Do you think opinions are swayed once they're within the four walls of the Capitol building, or do you think people have come in and they kind of already had their opinions?
I think like 2 to 3 people can be swayed, but I think on a whole,
It could be big on a tie vote.
The majority of people come in knowing what they're going to do that day.
Yes.
Even with the immunity issue, because to me, Tammy, you said the bill was robust, and I tried to read it, and it's 71 pages long. It is definitely robust, and it seems to reference back to an existing bill. So really, you have to read the previous bill and then the one that's amended by this one to really grasp the entire concept of what the police accountability bill is doing. But do you think that at 4 a.m. people were cognizant of really the full extent of the decision that's taking place? I feel like there needs to be kind of a primer for people, like a 1-page document that people can really look at and say, this is what this bill does. And maybe that'll happen after whatever action the Senate takes and whatever the governor does, because I don't want to presume absolutely that this is going to turn into law. But I feel like there's a lot of misinformation that's out there about the bill in general. And I think particularly about the qualified immunity issue, because I don't feel like I understand it completely either.
It is complicated. I mean, this is hard to really. I am not an attorney. I mean, so we are fortunate to have a lot of colleagues who are attorneys, or have worked in that building so long that they really understand how to put language in things. I watched some of that process really more for the first time through this than ever before. But to hear it in layman's term, I have to look at the Office of Legislative Research, the way that they break it down. And I've been in so many meetings around it, but it's still really hard for people to grasp And I'm hoping there will be a very condensed way of making plain what is in here to make people, because what people are afraid of is that police officers are no longer going to do their jobs out of fear. And people are afraid that a police officer is afraid that they will be found guilty of something and they will lose their livelihood, their homes. And the bar for that is incredibly high. It really does not, the police officer would have to do something egregious, such as in the case of George Floyd, for something like that to be the case. They have to be found guilty after going through a process before something like that would take place. But the way that what I'm hearing is people are saying, no, we're going to lose our homes, we're going to be afraid to act. And that is not the case. We want to make sure that police are more protected, that they get different types of training, that they get the mental health pieces, that they understand, what would happen that it would make you decertified. And if that's the case, then what that means for your future. But we want to police officers to understand, we want the good officers protected so that they can speak up. If you see, the officer that was on George Floyd's neck was a training officer. So there were 3 other people there and no one did anything. So now we say, if that happens here, someone has to do something. It's right here. So that is a part of your responsibility. To me, the fact that he was a training officer and had so many times been brought up on different complaints and nothing happened, that should not happen. So we're trying to protect the good police officers from ones like that, where people are afraid to step forward in the event that they see an experiencing thing. So like you, Ronni, I hope that, and I'm sure it will come in the days to come, that a better understanding of a true breakdown, bullet points to help people understand this, if you're able to simplify it.
I agree with
Well,
that.
I think that a lot of police officers have expressed, and a few of them have said this to me, they're afraid of frivolous lawsuits of somebody with an axe to grind. And, anyone can sue anyone, and our country is very litigious. So I think they're afraid that those types of actions are going to negatively impact them when just because, somebody might not like them because they've gotten a couple tickets or for whatever reason, and they're going to be then risking their livelihood, risking their house, risking, their savings for their kids' college education, their lives, really. And that's what they've expressed as a fear.
So I think another interesting thing, and I raised this before, but I'll reiterate it, is that the public hearing process that happened that Friday before, when these concerns were raised, the bill was changed. And I don't think the public knew that. And so the bill that was heard in that public hearing, as a result of public comment, which is how the process is supposed to work, changed the bill so that the municipality is actually held accountable. So no individual officer can be sued by someone. It's the municipality that will be sued. Now, if that individual officer does something so egregious and willfully against the law, the municipality can seek reimbursement from the individual officer. But we did change it. Additionally, and I'm not a lawyer either, and I'll qualify this because I'm going to explain it in layman's terms, but they changed, the Judiciary Committee changed something else so that there's not as much of an incentive for lawyers to take these cases because they wouldn't get paid out until the end. And so you'd have to put in all the work. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but they did switch it so that it wouldn't be something where lawyers would want to take these cases all the time. That's up for debate, but that piece was changed as well.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of see where the bar is too. What constitutes, in the world I used to work in, we would call it like gross negligence, but willful, malicious, and I can't think, there's one other word in the bill. I was reading it today, but I know malicious and willful, and I don't know if egregious was the word in there or not. I'm going to look it up right now.
The other thing
what kind of is the bar that's reached? When I reset my computer, it bumped me out of the section that I was in.
The other thing I just wanted to clarify about the process is, when you said, do you think people at 4 a.m. are understanding? what people don't know, and they wouldn't because this is the behind the scenes process, is that the House Democrats, we caucused on Tuesday night from 7 p.m. till midnight. And then we had on a Zoom, and then we had another caucus the next night for about 3 hours. And what that means is we talked about the bill. So, and we hashed out things, and people got to hear all of what we're kind of explaining now. And so, yes, the debate started at 1 a.m. And I know that the public would then maybe be thinking, well, what can you learn at 2 a.m. in the morning? We had already really discussed and hashed out like what was going on. So we had that opportunity to learn how the bill had changed from the Friday public hearing to what we were going to be voting on.
Malicious, wanton, or is the other word that was missing, or willful. Those are the terms that are in there. Yeah, and I mean, I actually work very, very late overnight. Often. So I've been known to, John teases me about this, to post things at 4 a.m. also. So I know that, but
I'll
I'm
wake
a total
up
night
at,
owl.
Jill, as you say, I'll wake up at 6 as adults do, and I'll look, and Ronnie Zimmer Newton posted something 2.5 hours ago. I'm like, oh my Lord.
I don't know if that's adult. 4 a.m.
Oh my goodness. So,
Well, it's, things
Hard
happen late at night. So
Yeah.
so I think this hits on a really important issue, because the Senate is, if I understood you, it was, I think before we went live, the Senate is discussing this issue literally right now. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Is it going to pass?
I hope so.
I sure hope so.
Do you have a sense or not? I mean, do you have that kind of communication, or is it not something you get a feel for?
I mean, the interesting thing I was explaining beforehand is that it has to pass as a whole. And what I mean by that is if they tried to do the amendment about qualified immunity, like we debated, if they amend the bill in any way, how the process works
back to you, right?
The House.
Yeah.
But it's a special session and we're not going back in. So
yeah, we're vended. Yeah.
so they have to pass it as is. And so it's my hope that they pass it as is.
So
I'm
sorry.
I just wanted to say, at the press conference yesterday, it sounded to me that the governor sounds like he affirms that it's a good bill. So I'm hoping that the Senate is paying attention to both sides are kind of smushed in between, and they get the votes, but you don't know. I mean, we really don't know until it's done.
Well, that's my fear with the Senate is, Ronnie and I in pre-production yesterday when we had a pre-production meeting, aka a cup of coffee in town, and it was definitely clear to both of us that understanding that the indemnification of police, that piece of it, is confusing to people. And it sounds like, we need to educate the public. I say we, but but also
me really. I mean, as the media, I kind of feel like it is my job, but
so,
I don't want to write about it until I'm really, really clear. And I've had discussions with like at least 5 or 6 different people today, trying to educate me on it. And I read the bill, but I feel like I need that intense, like really in-depth grasp of it.
Yeah.
So, a couple of legislative issues I want to ask you about that I know are tabled for now, but something could happen in the future. Number one, Jillian, I brought this up with you, but when we bumped into each other a few weeks ago, but I'm going to narrow it down a little bit. I understand that online gaming is off the table. I understand why, because of the existing agreements with the casinos. Has there been discussion of permitting it on the sovereign land? Is there anything of that piece happening?
Not to my knowledge right now, like in a special session or even in September. Right. I am sure the conversation will come up again in January in 2021. Having met with all sides, it's so complicated because there are the dynamics of the current existing casinos and them wanting it, and then other folks wanting it, and it's just kind of this ongoing debate. Not that I want to push it to Lamont, but it really does seem like it needs to be a negotiation.
Right. Yeah,
that gets agreed.
It's tough because I think when the dust settles from COVID, which hopefully will happen this winter, everyone's going to wake up with deficits and debt beyond anything any state or local level organization could ever have imagined. So that's why I think about these revenue generating. Another one is marijuana. Has there been talk about that? Is that still tabled?
I haven't heard anything since. It's been a while. I don't know about you, Jillian. I would expect that to also come up in January, but
I would think since that was a Lamont proposal this past session before, again, March hit and life changed as we know it, I would think that if things are good in January, but who knows, that would be a proposal on the table. Because at that point, what are we heading into? Lamont would have 2 years left. That would actually be like a perfect year to do it. So I would think he's going to come in with that.
Do you foresee another special session before the election?
I think we may very well have one in September. That's what has been floated, maybe to finish up some, bills that that were in such a good standing, but never got quite there to take those up at that time. So I would be surprised if we're not called in September.
Well, and aren't there issues with the executive orders too, and kind of those things? They're expiring September 8th or 9th, and then what happens after that? It leaves a whole lot of loose ends, some of which I guess the legislature might be able to tie up.
That's what, yeah, we've been told we should prepare for right after Labor Day to come in, to what Tammy said, to any of the bills that had bipartisan support in the last session, but also to address COVID. So any bills. Now, what we haven't told, what's interesting is with regards to the budget, we're trying to look for budget neutral proposals, which can be challenging because in this time, it seems like many of the proposals would include funding. So it's a balance, but yes, I definitely think we'll be back in September to address again those issues and COVID related issues.
How about now? See, this is unfair to you, but I'm going to hit you anyway. Tolls. I'll make you answer this one, Jillian.
Well, I have always been candid. I support tolls. I supported the first toll proposal, so you're not hitting me with anything hard. I think we need to repair our roads. It helps with economic development. It makes Connecticut more desirable. I don't buy into all the hype that the world is ending because of tolls. If you go to any other state, they have them. I have not heard though, and I would say based on if we lead by fear, which unfortunately sometimes we do, fear would play out that people are really strapped financially, which is true. I'm not denying that. And so I don't know if now is the time for tolls, but my support remains.
I was actually surprised that they started doing the project on 84 here in West Hartford, where they were going to fund it through a toll gantry kind of over that bridge right near Conard. Yeah. And it caught me by surprise when I got a news release from the Department of Transportation that they were going forward on this, because I thought even doing that was dependent on the toll revenue or the presumption that toll revenue would be forthcoming. But apparently it was actually in the plans for quite some time, and it's well underway now.
It's just, I guess, where the money comes from, right?
Right. And I don't know where that money's coming from, but they're working on it. And
yeah.
I don't know, buy gold. Maybe that's the message here. I don't know. Anyway, any other big legislative issues that I might have missed, Ronni might have missed to talk about? I've got a couple.
There is a question that's here on the WEHA post, and there's some questions about absentee ballots, and Adam Rader asks is how much will the upcoming election influence whether no question absentee ballot voting will one day become permanent?
That is something that came up as far as at least having early voting and no excuse absentee voting. And I can tell you that there's not bipartisan buy-in from the last set of hearings that we had, but it is something that I think we should seriously consider and we need to talk about when we go back in January, because there's so many other states that are doing it well. Colorado is a great model for it, and we have very restrictive voting laws here in Connecticut. And I think something like the coronavirus makes us think more about that. But it's also, we should be trying to expand voting, period. And anything that allows for that to take place that can be done safely. And especially now, if we have already put the money into getting those boxes and having them set up, it would be wonderful to consider you continue using them and have, legislation to support that. So I personally, I'm a member of that committee. That is something that I really want us to talk about moving forward.
And it does seem like there's some growing pains though with trying to take our current system of absentee ballot voting and expand it, because the process that the registrars and the town clerk have to go through is really time consuming and cumbersome. And to accomplish that efficiently, something probably needs to change in that process to make it a little more efficient.
I agree. We would have to change the way that we do things. And if we have more time, we could do that. We're rushing everything right now because of the coronavirus, obviously, but I agree.
I could see us even pushing for a bill this September. I know I'd be interested in that, because the election laws are in our Constitution, you have to pass these things in 2 consecutive legislatures. And so if we don't pass a law this special session regarding no excuse absentee ballot, we would have to pass it in 21, 22, and then pass it again in 23, 24. So if we were able to do it in this special session in September, we could do it again in 21, 22. So I think you will start to see that that's starting to bubble up, because I think there will be a push to try and get it through.
Yeah.
And then after that happens, it still needs to be on the ballot and be voted by the electorate, right? So it's not just up to the legislature.
Correct.
Because what's happened for the primary and for the general election this year, which I think not everybody realizes, is that what it really is doing is expanding the definition of sickness to include the existence of coronavirus sickness in the community, which makes you afraid to go to the polls, so you can vote by absentee ballot because of the existence of sickness in the community, even if you're not personally ill.
Correct.
But it's not early voting. It is no excuse absentee ballot but voting, but it's not a permanent thing.
No, it's not. And then I wonder, if we have, pretend you're in my case, in April, say there's something, or February, we have another special election. In 2021, coronavirus, I'm sure, will be still here, and sadly, in February.
No.
It could be, I don't want to be, hopefully I'm wrong, and it will disappear. It'll go away. It's getting warm. I'm sounding like things I hear on the news. But what if, but if that's the case, then we're here we are again, right? We're having to figure out a way to make sure people can vote for their primaries if that happens, or special elections, however that works. So I think we need to really address this. I would love to be like Jillian and address it in September. We'll see.
So let's, Tammy, let me do this, because we are running out of time. So
and I might disappear again.
And I don't want you to disappear. So both of you are facing races come this November. How are you feeling, and how are you handling your campaigns given everything that's going on with COVID?
I'll really defer to Jillian on this. I, at this point, don't have an opponent.
Okay, I thought you did. Okay.
I don't. So I am still doing, obviously, a campaign. I plan to do everything I would do, but I won't be sending out as many mailers, things like that. But I will be still very engaged. But Jillian has an opponent, so let her answer that.
So we'll be kicking off soon. We already kicked off, but we'll be starting our door knocking. And I door knocked for a colleague, and kind of as a test run. And if you're wearing your mask and you stand 6 feet back and you let people know that, it's up to them what they want to do, they actually are interested in having a conversation. So I'll be doing some door knocking, doing some phone calls, just focused on hearing from the constituents, what has worked, what hasn't, and what would they like to see me do going forward.
And that is exactly, and just so you know, I don't take this lightly. That's exactly what I will do, because ultimately it's the constituent voice that we're representing. So we need to know what people are experiencing and what they want to see, what they see for the future. And this is the opportunity I will definitely do more outreach on phone calls. The door knocking, I will try some of that, but some of that I know people are a little bit squeamish around. So we'll just see. Hopefully this coronavirus will make it so that we can all be out there, because that's one of my favorite things to do for sure.
So certainly it's changed things a little bit, but it's nice that we can get out there a little bit. So anyway, any last comments from either of our guests, Jillian or Tammy?
Oh, we lost
Oh,
Tammy.
now we know how Tammy feels.
Tammy says goodnight.
Yes, exactly. So,
I just
anyway,
appreciate
Jillian, any last thoughts?
I just appreciate the opportunity and what you all do for our community. And no, just again, very grateful to have the opportunity to serve in this role. So thank you.
Well, we are grateful for you and everything that you do for the community and the state. And Ronni and I are having a great time doing the show. Oh, Tammy's going to get to say her goodbye. So this is good. Hold on. They can't hear you yet. Tammy, I got to get you back up here. There you go. No, okay, now they can hear you.
Oh my goodness, goodbye.
Jillian just gave us the most eloquent, tearful, like Ronni and I were both crying at her.
Good luck, Tammy. Good luck.
So based on that, Tammy, what would you like?
I don't know if you can. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. And I have to say also, I'm so happy to serve alongside with Jillian Gilchrist. We served together on the Board of Ed, and it's nice to have this opportunity again. And we're learning and growing together. And she really understands this process, even though she's new in there. And it's wonderful to have her there. And I thank you so much for the service that the two of you are doing to our community, because you help to keep us informed and engaged. And thank you for putting up with me. I have no idea what's happening, but I should have stayed.
It's so funny. I see Kyle exiting the room every time you get back.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be running out of the room.
I thought it'd be a cool idea to come to his place where it's calm and quieter and all that stuff is set up. He says he has never seen this happen before.
It's a really weird issue. We've never had it, so we suspected something over there, but I feel terrible, and I am sorry that you've done.
I would think he would have really good Wi-Fi. So
he does. He says he thinks
excellent.
He says he thinks it's a software glitch. So I don't know, but he keeps running and they're helping me.
So, well, we are great. Tell Kyle we are grateful for the help. And Ronni, I apologize. I really rushed you on your opening remarks.
Oh no, that's it. I've got some more work left to do tonight, but that's kind of par for the course. But
all right. Well, Jillian Gilchrist, 18th District, Tammy Exum, 19th District, Ronni Zimmer-Newton, wehow.com, John Lyons. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you.